Dr. Taylor Jackson here, and tonight I'm taking your questions about everything involving hair and how that can be used to solve a crime, such as a homicide. So first of all, I just want to start by talking about all the different components of hair. The hair shaft is actually the part of the hair that pokes through the surface of the skin, and underneath the surface you have the epidermis, then the dermis, then the sebaceous gland, the papilla, the capillary, and then the subcutaneous tissue. And then hair also has 3 different stages of life. It goes through the anagen stage first, which is when the hair is actively growing and cells around the follicle rapidly deposit materials into the hair. And then you have the catagen stage, which is where the hair is still growing, but it's also changing. And then the last stage is the telogen stage, which is when the follicle becomes dormant. What are the differences between ethnic groups and bodily region differences in the hair? So basically what ethnic groups is that broad and racial groups do exhibit some shared physical characteristics, but they're not applicable to all individuals of these groups. Therefore, individual hairs can't be assigned to any of these groups. And bodily region differences are that the hair on the scalp tends to be more fine as opposed to armpit hair, pubic hair, which tends to be more coarse. Hair usually becomes more apparent during puberty. Facial hair also become more common in both sexes, but is more commonly known on the male face and is also more coarse than hair on the head. Human versus non-human. Animal hair is more dense toward the medulla, and human hair tends to be denser toward the cuticle. And the color patterns are more possible in animals rather than in humans, and the medulla is much thicker in animals. For example, the medulla index on a strand of cattle hair is 0.5 millimeters, whereas a human is more towards 0.33 millimeters or less than that even. And the cuticle scales resemble petals or a stack of crowns in animals, whereas with humans they're more commonly flattened and narrow. They're used in investigations. Well, macroscopic investigators indicate the length, the color, the curliness of hair, and then the contrast microscopy shows presence of dye or any other type of hair treatments that someone may have had, such as highlights using bleach or perms, and then electron microscopes yield yet even more detail about the hair. The question is how can hair be used actually to solve a crime? Well, in 1990, a woman named Ava Showen was murdered with 1 gunshot wound to the head, and her daughter actually discovered her, and her husband was under suspicion, but he was clearly grieving the loss of his wife. So police and investigators got the gun shell, and they were hoping to track down a suspect that way, but they just didn't have any connections or any leads on that. So 3 years later, after the case was closed and it was considered a cold case, a man in Arizona called the local police believing that his brother was the one that committed the crime. And his name was Marquise. And detectives learned that Marquise, the suspect, had traveled on this road and threw 2 bundles of clothes out on his way back from supposedly committing this crime. Well, the dirt preserved that, and forensic trace expert Joseph Snyder analyzed the color and the structure of that 1 strand of hair and announced it to be a close match to that of Ava Showen. It was qualified as class evidence and didn't convict Marquise. However, it played a powerful role in this investigation because when investigators told Marquise that Mr. Snyder had, made this connection of this 1 strand of hair, it led to his confession, which eventually did lead to his conviction. Thanks for tuning in tonight.